Hello, everyone. Welcome to Abnormal Investigations. Today, we have a special guest joining us, John. He's going to share some of his encounters and some of his, I guess, history and some of the history around where he lives. So, looking very forward to that today. We've got Amanda joining us today. She's going to be co hosting. So, let me go ahead and bring Amanda on, see if we can get her onto the stage real quick. Maybe. If everything will work right, she should be coming up on stage now. 1 second. We always have to have a little bit of difficulties. Seems like that always has to happen to us right at the beginning. It tells me that I just got kicked out of my StreamYard account for some reason, so we're going to have to go back in before we can bring Amanda on. But John has sounds like some pretty interesting encounters. I think you're going to really enjoy tonight. He seems to have a lot to share. I'm excited to hear everything that he has to share. He's, I think, got a lot of native stories also. He comes from a native background, so should be very, very, very interesting. So we're just about there at getting Amanda put on here. We should be right there. And we add her to the stage, if it will.
Hi, Mike.
Hello, Amanda. Hello.
Hello.
Having
It wasn't
a little
my
bit
fault
of,
this time.
oh my goodness, this thing, it fights me every time that I try to do this. So are you looking forward to interviewing John today?
Yes, and it's pouring down rain here in California. It's supposed to rain all week, so I'm excited about that. We don't get much rain
Oh,
here.
wow. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a little bit of a rain last weekend. It was nice. I enjoyed it. All right. Well, everybody, if you would, let's welcome John and let's go ahead and bring him on and let's get this kicked off. Hello, John. Welcome to the show.
Hi, John.
Hello there. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to sharing some of this stuff. Yeah, I got a lot to share, so just let me know whatever you want to start with. I'm a little nervous
Okay.
to get started, so I got to shake out the cobwebs. But
Oh,
thanks
I
for having.
understand.
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks for
it's a
having me
pleasure to
on.
have you. Let's just start off with let's go with one of your encounters, one of your I guess maybe one of your scariest encounters or your favorite encounter.
Okay, I got one that's a good start. Now, I call it a Thunderbird encounter, but really it's just we can call it an unknown bird. But it looked an eagle. It looked like an eagle in its profile.
Uh-huh.
But what do you think about Thunderbirds?
You know, I come from a Cherokee past, and I'm Cherokee, and I know that they used to talk a lot about the Thunderbirds. There was a story or an encounter that I had done a while back. It's been a while now, to where a man and a woman went up a mountain, and the woman ended up going a little higher than the man, and he like reported hearing like large wings flapping, and she ended up missing, and they never found her, and he always said that he believed that that's what it took her, was a Thunderbird.
Wow,
Okay,
that's scary.
yeah, that's pretty interesting. Um, Now that kind of fits right in with what I'm going to share. Maybe it'll
Okay.
shine a bit of light on that because actually afterwards I did a whole bunch of research and the Thunderbird is actually very common. I would say it's just as common as or almost as common as the werewolf and Bigfoot. Like if you look at the around the world at the history, now what happens is sometimes they'll give it a different name, but specifically in America, they will call it Thunderbird. But each tribe will have its own kind of
Right.
native word for it, right? And most tribes actually don't have contact except with their own neighboring tribe. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It's one of those constant phenomenons. And like I've been paying attention a lot to different paranormal stories over the years, and it does come up quite often. Large birds.
Do you think that they're maybe responsible for some of the missing children and stuff?
Well, they could be. There's definitely old stories about that. Now, have you ever seen the video of the golden eagle that grabs a goat and throws it off a cliff?
Oh, I haven't seen that.
No.
Okay, that's worth a watch because it's pretty scary looking, and it's pretty old footage from National Geographic or something. So it's long before AI, but yeah, golden eagles can actually pick up goats, and what they do is they glide with them and they'll throw them off a cliff. Then they'll eat the remains down at the bottom, right?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Wow. So you encountered one of these birds?
I believe so, yes. And actually, I was very, very close. I was about, I estimate 20 feet away, but maybe 30. We were separated from a small stream. But would you like me to rewind and get to rewind to the start of the story and just tell you the encounter?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, there's this little river that I used to hunt at, and I was doing, crossbow hunting. And I didn't really. So the thing about hunting is I only harvested one deer in my entire hunting career. Spent a lot of time out in the woods. It was just more so like a reason to get my knife, get my boots, and it kind of just got me out in the woods. And I would kind of um, what it had to do with preparing for an event, and I would kind of use it to clear my mind, to get in shape and uh, think about things. And I kind of got the inspiration from these old native war chiefs who would talk about fasting, right? Whenever you have something you're trying to solve or you're thinking about, or maybe you even got a competition or something, you go out into the wilderness and fast and think about it, right? So that's kind of what I would do is like it just became a thing where I liked going out into the woods, off trail, and just paying attention. Very rarely did I ever see anything, but this one time now, okay, the reason why I'm, setting this up is because the terrain is important here. Crossbow hunting, has different zones compared to rifle hunting, and this opens up some opportunities for hunting kinda near farmland where the deer are a little bit more abundant. But this terrain would drop down because of, I'm assuming the river has been running for so long. It's carved out what is kinda like a mini canyon, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So you're kind of like down in like a little gully like area, right?
Yeah, like 100 or 200-foot drop. At one point,
Oh, wow.
there's a train track, and you could walk across the train tracks, and you're looking down at the river, and it's a big drop, like I said, 150, maybe 200 feet. So on
Wow.
one area, there's actually a rope where you would rappel down to the bottom. Now, why I would do that is because now I know there's no hiking trails, there's no houses, there's no working trails, logging trails, and I have a safe backdrop that if, like, let's say an arrow were to, if I took a shot and missed, it's just for safety. That means I know that there's always going to be a wall to catch my arrow. It's not going to, fly somewhere unsafe. So this is why I picked this area for for hunting on the odd chance that I would see a deer, because also I never sat in a blind and waited for deer. What I would do is just hike and adventure and basically just learn every piece of the land down there. I
Kind
always
of
found,
like a walking stock.
yeah, yeah, and I set up a trail camera and
That's cool.
started learning like all the deer, and by the size of their antlers, over the years I started recognizing specific ones and would see cougars and bears and on the camera, never in person. Actually, once I saw a cougar, just as I shine. So, anyways, I felt like I knew everywhere just about in this area, and like I would even find carcasses, deer carcasses and things like that. One day, I just like any other, so I've been down there hundreds of times, but I was fasting, and I think that might be important to the story for later. Like, because here's the thing, at the time, it didn't seem important, but now what I know looking back, I think this is like a element of the story. And I wasn't fasting like for days. What I would do is just I would leave my house with no brekkie, and then I would carry no lunch, so that I'm like forced to fast.
Right.
But it wasn't like a multiple day, multiple night. It was just like just an afternoon thing, nothing extreme. So it's not like I was to the point of being delirious or anything like that. But I was coming down this one part where it's on the upper level. So this is before it drops down. I'm walking through, and I don't know why, but I got a strange feeling, and I went to look just to see if there was some deer in the area. I don't know if I saw some movement, but I just kind of felt the need to go to this one section. And when I got to this one particular part was a cliff. Now, sometimes it's a hill that drops down that 100 feet or 200 feet, but this particular spot was a cliff, like a dangerous cliff. I came out to the tree line, and I was kind of moving stealthy, and I poked my head out, and something brown and gigantic like this, I just see this mass start moving, like it kind of freaked me out. And when you get scared, it takes you a moment to realize and gather your bearings, to realize like what you're looking at.
Right.
It feels like forever, but really just a fraction of a second goes by. But I realize, and this is also important, this river is usually a stream. Like in the summer, I can walk across it with my boots without getting my socks wet. Like I got some hunting gum boots, right? So it's not like a dangerous river. However, in the wintertime, it really picks up in some spots. It looks a little dangerous. But I say that because the stream is pretty narrow, and when you're in this area, the forest is very, very dense. So when there's a stream, what happens is there's a break in the trees. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And so you kind of got this distance from the shore, the water, the other side of the shore, and then the trees start up again. So you got this kind of funnel that the trees are creating. On top of that, I'm on this hill that also kind of makes it like a canyon. But across the river, where the trees pick up again, are not. It's not on top of the hill. So I'm eye level with the trees across the river. Um, does that kind of make sense for how can you visualize what I mean by that? I'm eye level with the tip of the tree across from me.
Right.
Yeah.
And actually so this bird is in that tree, and it didn't move until I got to the opening. Like I don't know if it was just trying to stay still and wait and to see if I was going to pass by, but it starts flapping its wings in the tree, and it takes it probably 3 strides or something. Like, I don't know if you could imagine, but it takes a couple. It kicks its wings a few times, and the tree bends, and then you can see it jump. It pushes off the tree, and the tree does a little spring. You know what I mean? The tree springs, and he kicks off, and then begins his stride.
Because he was so big.
Yeah, like you could see the way he kicked off, that it was a little bit of power on it. But now the most impressive, or the thing I didn't quite understand, was the wings flapping. And okay, so I got like videos of being pretty close to eagles. When you go down to the beach on the Indian reservation, there's like these salmon runs. The eagles come out and they go crazy, and so you can get up really close to swarms of them. But this thing, and the sound of the wings was completely different than the sound of a large eagle's wings. This thing had 2 sounds. It did a whoosh, and then like a crack whip at the end of the whoosh. So you could hear this woof. And then when it got to the end of the stride, it kind of went like if you ever, when you're a kid, you ever play with sticks and you can whip it and it kind of goes,
Oh
you can
yeah.
break. It almost did that, like a crack whip at the end. It goes whoosh, whoosh, but it's
Oh
like
wow.
it's really loud, and it's like smacking the air, um, to the point where I could hear every stride it takes. And the wings look different now. I don't know if this makes sense, but it wasn't just an eagle times 2. It was like the proportions looked different. Like the wings at the ends of the feathers looked longer. Like it kind of had this condor shape. I don't know if that makes sense, but it wasn't just that it was. I estimate it to be at least twice the size of the largest bald eagle that you could see, which we got here. And so their wingspan are 7 foot maximum on a female bald eagle, and the minimum on like on an adult is 5, so 5 to 7 feet. When I first saw this thing and I came home and told my partner here, I estimated 20 feet. I was like 12 to 20 feet, but now that I think about it, I think it was more like 10 to 12. It's just kind of hard to gauge. Like,
Oh yeah.
how when you see a meter, that doesn't look like it's a meter stick isn't very, very big. But if you see a dog that's a meter tall, like his
Right.
back, all of a sudden it's like a meter, looks like a lot.
Right.
I think I had that where this thing was so big and unusual, it threw my scale off.
And it's kind of hard in the woods too to compare something for size because nothing in the woods is really like the same size, and there's nothing we see every day that's to reference it to that's a certain size.
Right, yeah, it wasn't like leaning up against a mailbox or anything like that that I
Right.
can go and say like, "Oh, it was this tall." But I do know that it was huge, a little bit unusual looking, and then on top of it, the color was different. Bald eagles here, obviously black with the white head.
Uh-huh.
There's golden eagles down south, but they're not usually here, and I've never seen a golden eagle in person here. But young bald eagles have a very specific kind of like Neapolitan camouflage. It's almost brown, white, and black, like this mix, almost like a brindle boxer or something like that. Like it's a weird picture, or it's a weird color. I mean, it had that. It had like that's what I would compare it to the most, is a young bald eagle, except it is twice the size of a mature bald eagle.
Wow. So you said it looked a little bit unusual. What looked unusual about it to you compared to the regular eagle?
So everything was eagle except the color was, of course, the young eagle instead of being a mature eagle. And like I said, the feathers on the wings and the shape of the wings, it ends up looking more vulture or condor. However, the head was 100% eagle. But I don't know if you might have to like because I kind of Googled a bunch of different birds, was looking at their wingspans, wing shapes.
Uh,
Everything about it was eagle except its wings looked more like the profile of a condor. Kind of had this weird um longer feathers, had kind of a pointier wing.
So this thing was made for kind of like power and speed, huh?
Oh, it sure looked like it. Now let me tell you, the reason I brought up that goat and the golden eagle
Uh,
is because the my first thought was this thing could grab me and pull me off the cliff. And it was just a fraction of a second before I realized it's taken off down the river. But it did a few strides that I heard. It went whoosh, whip, whoosh, whip, whoosh, whip. And then it started gliding and it took up almost that whole opening, which might have been, like I mentioned, it was about 20 feet, maybe 30. But this thing appeared to take up most of that opening in the river and the break in between the trees. And what's interesting is it stayed below the tree line. So if you were anywhere except in this canyon, you would not see this thing.
so it knew not to go up to where it could be seen. Wow. I find these birds interesting too because of my great grandpa was full blood Cherokee, and we'd done some research on our bloodline, and I come from actually the Bird clan from the Cherokee, and that was pretty interesting because I've always been interested in birds, and then I found out that I came from the Bird clan, and uh, Grandpa, would talk about the Thunderbird, and it was kind of weird though. You know how like your family probably done it too. You're native. You know how they would talk about like the Thunderbird, but then they would always like talk about there's the Thunderbird, but then there was this other thing. They would never really give it a name, but they would always say like then this other thing. It was like meaner, and it was larger, and it was more like menacing. And he would always tell me like these creatures that was around my granny's house as a child, they both would say that these things flew, and that used to scare me to death. I hated that.
So the second one, that's pretty interesting because can I ask, did he ever give any descriptions on behavior? Like for example, did he ever mention if it was like possibly had green skin or it was like a undead thing?
The only thing really, as far as describing it, he would always tell us, as I remember, he would always say like, because we had a lot of little cousins that would play outside, and he would always say, you better be careful. If we was under the trees, he would always say we were safe because around the house they had a bunch of elm trees for the shade, for the home, and the yard, had the swing set and everything. He would always say, if you play under the trees, under the canopy, you were safe. But he would say, now if you go out there in that field, that thing is liable to swoop down and grab you. And he would always talk about the talons. He would always say how big the talons were and how sharp they were. And he said, it'll come down and it'll hook you and you'll be gone. And, that terrified us. But I mean, he was serious, when he would tell the story.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's always those stories and people often think they're just Boogerman stories to keep the kids from wandering away. But in our area, the the female Sasquatch is actually considered quite dangerous, and she's used as like the boogeyman. That if for kids anyway, that if kids would come out, that she would actually take them. And now apparently there would actually be kids that would go missing. It wasn't like all just, it wasn't all myth, let's say. It was a mystery. However, if you asked the locals, they would say, oh, that this is who did it. But then people would say, oh, well, I don't think there's proof for that, so must be something else. You know, actually, we get a lot of missing 411 cases in the area. And I actually remember around 2016 when one actually happened and I got to kind of pay attention live. They couldn't find the poor old lady. They found a piece of clothing really far away off trail, and the dogs couldn't find a scent. And I believe that they never found a trace of her. And there's a weird mountain here that has a bit of a spooky name. And there's been like a ski lodge burnt down, and they never rebuilt anything up there again. But
Wow.
it dates back to the natives. Actually, they had a story about this war, and they sent the people, like the women, the people who are not in the war, the old, the sick, the women, the children, they sent them up to this mountain. And by the end of the war, when they went up there, they were all gone. The entire
Oh, wow.
village had actually disappeared. And there's a few different versions of the story. In one, they say there was large footprints that they tracked, and they eventually lost the tracks deep in the mountains, and that was the end of it. Now, there's other stories that leave that part out. So the question is, do they leave it out because they don't believe in it? Or did someone add it to it because they do believe it? I think I would lean towards the it being more part of the story because of the local lore, not only in this area, but it gets pretty common across, especially across America.
I agree. We were told too, as children growing up, kind of what we were told was, and I don't know if you heard this, but we was always told the Sasquatch. Um, we were told like to take precautions, kind of like, they would say, if you say go fishing, right? Grandpa would say, if you go fishing and it's dark time, you need to have a fire. And if you have a fire, you'll be okay. And, they would always say, if you hear it, out in the woods, don't pay no attention to it. Don't react to it. It might throw some sticks at you. It might throw some little pebbles. But if you ignore it and you stay by the fire, you'll be okay. But then they would always, warn us, don't interact with it. Don't, like watch it and try to, mess with it. Just let it do its thing and let it move on. Was you kind of told that?
I
Well,
wasn't.
we actually never grew up in the edge of the woods, and my family, they don't really believe in all that. Like, it's kind of funny, but I was the one who had told them about Bigfoot and stuff like that. So when I told my dad that, he was like, he told me about this story where him and my mom, this is before I was born, they went and parked a truck a lot on the logging road out here, and he said something grabbed the back of his truck and started bouncing it to the point where the back tires came off. And this was like an old heavy duty Ford 4x4. Probably it was a fairly old truck. It was my grandpa's before that, but it was a big truck. And he said whatever grabbed it it wasn't just like somebody big jumping in the back. He said whatever it was bounced it like a basketball, and then he floored it. And eventually the tires, when they came back down, they got some traction and they took off, and then just never really talked about it, never brought it up to anybody. But I was telling them about that area and how people have their campers get shaken.
Right.
and stuff like that. And you know what? My dad actually has this other story, and what's funny is like once in a while he would get drunk and share it, where he says that one day he was sleeping and the Easter bunny tripped over him. And he woke up and he said the Easter bunny was in his house. I always thought he was kind of bullshitting until
Right.
just a few years ago, somebody was saying that they had just like any one of these encounters, but it was like I believe it was in their house as well. And it wasn't like I don't think it's somebody in an Easter bunny costume. Instead, it's something more like what you would see on the Egyptian walls, like some sort of I don't poltergeist, I guess.
Oh, wow.
A demonic presence.
It's exactly like something like that. Like it was like I don't think it was his dad definitely doesn't dress up like Santa or the Easter bunny.
Right.
He wasn't that type, and I don't
Well,
think someone broke in to do it, and he
I
just had
doubt
no
that too.
explanation.
I had an encounter one night while I was out, and everybody tried to blame it on my sister, saying that she was in a bunny suit. But uh, there was something walking by my vehicle that looked like it had really long ears on top or horns, and everybody called it, the big bunny. And that was really weird. That was a weird, weird, weird night.
Okay, up till a few years ago, I never used to take those things very serious until so this encounter with this bird was kind of just the beginning, and I wish I could share all of it, but we're definitely winding down on time. But my ears perked up when you mentioned the other entity because in our mythology, or not ours, but my grandma's, I mentioned I have heritage. I call it my grandma's tribe, not necessarily mine.
Right.
But there is a second being, and there's actually this hierarchy of power when it comes to these spiritual entities. Now, this is something else about that Thunderbird. When I was looking into the lore, it was not describing an ordinary cryptid. In fact, it was something, what's the word? Something far more powerful, something far more common. And it was so mind blowing and mind turning that I had to turn every stone just to answer the questions I had. And if you have any questions about that, like the problem is there's so much to break down, but based on where I'm at now, the identity of that thing and why it's everywhere is far more consequential to more than just Native American people. It's oh man, I don't even know how to describe it. Okay, the Thunderbird, that's a can of worms for sure. Because like I said, it's all over the world. But what happens is, just like with other cryptids, when the name gets changed, all of a sudden it's a whole new being. It's as if they got a new PR team and now they've rebranded themselves as
Yeah.
something else. You know
It
what I
makes
mean?
it
And
hard.
it
Yeah.
comes
Yeah.
and it comes down to interpretations. And so what happens is you have a whole bucket full of Thunderbirds, but from when you collect them all, I'm saying if you go around here, there, and like, you got a lot of different kinds of Thunderbirds, but from what I've seen, there's a specific one, whatever it is actually most of those Thunderbirds in that bucket. I don't know how many, and why I say that is there's other things like unidentified birds
Right.
There's that large eagle I seen. I actually found an extinct eagle called a Washington sea eagle, and I found it like 10 years after my encounter, but it it was last seen in like the end of the 1800s or something like that.
Oh wow.
And guess what? They said it nests on cliffs, and it was seen in kind of the Washington West Coast area. But it lived on the edge of cliffs on the sea, and somebody had seen it and they documented it, and I think they're saying it's about 10 feet, 10 to 12 feet, and it's a brown eagle of all things. So
Wow.
it matched all the description of what I seen. But however, things get a little complicated now when it comes to skinwalkers, and maybe we'll come back to this because the Thunderbirds and skinwalkers are not only are they connected, but they're very similar in more ways than just being everywhere. Because you know how we got werewolves, or like however you want to interpret them. We got the upright dogs and of different variations, some on all fours, some upright, but you could find them all over the world.
Right. Have you ever had an encounter with like a werewolf or upright Canaan?
No, I have not, which is, I find it a little funky because of how much I've studied them and stuff. But I have a friend in the area who had an encounter, which is actually kind of a neat one. It's very unusual, and at the time I was like, I thought he was maybe partying a little too much.
Right.
But we actually, so at the time we were only like 16, and we were like skateboarders, and we didn't do like any heavy drugs or anything like that. But he was drinking on his way home, and he said he saw the Marsden Witch, which is a real lady. And the kids call her that because when you look at her, she's dressed in all, like, she's a typical witch. When you look at her, like, you just know she's got all the burgundy, purple, everything dark, dark nails, dark makeup, dark lipstick. She freaks people out, especially the kids. So when people would leave um, this area, because what kids would do is they'd go to their parents' cabin or whatever out in the country a little bit, where they could have a bonfire, a party, whatever. But he said one day him and one other guy were walking home, and it's a long, dark road when you walk home from there. He said he sees the Marsden Witch, and well, he opened the story by saying, "I saw a werewolf." And I said, "What?" I said, "Were you high, man?" And he's like, "No, no, we were drinking on the way home." And so I asked him to explain. Sorry, I'm just getting an echo. So I asked him to explain. He says that he's walking home and he sees the Marsden Witch, and she's walking a big black dog. Sorry to pause, but I'm getting a really bad echo through someone's headset.
Huh.
Try it now.
Hello, hello.
Still
Yep,
got it.
I still got the echo. Yep. Seems good now.
There we are.
Okay. He says he sees the Marsden Witch, and she's walking a giant black dog. And he said for some reason he got like really scared. He said the dog runs across the street and it stands up on two legs and starts looking around. And he said him and his friend got out of there top speed, and they never even looked back. And I thought, I said, was it a bear? He said, no, that wasn't a bear, man. He said it was a dog, and he said it stood up on two legs. And so that story always kind of stood with me, but I thought, man, it must have been a black bear. But now I think there's something else going on with that. Now, the same kid actually had another encounter where a group of them ran into something that was paralleling them on a trail, and he says it grunted because they caught him in the moonlight, and there was a silhouette. He said it spun its head really fast at them and kind of made a grunt, and then it took off. Scared the bejeebies out of all of them. But I never seen anything or was never with anybody when they experienced that stuff on the way home.
It's almost like it knew they were maybe headed home.
Well, I almost imagined that some of that stuff would be paying attention to a lot of those parties, but maybe people don't always get that silhouette in the moonlight,
Right.
or we're not hearing the stories. People are just saying we saw something and ran home.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, even when they were back and, in their younger days, they would see something, they would just run, 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 run. I remember, getting scared when we were little and we would run, run for the house, run inside the house.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
I
that
would run
exactly.
too.
I did.
Just
I would run.
run without looking back.
Oh, yeah.
Me
Just
too.
run and hope it didn't catch you.
But so what now looking back at that story, and you think about the connection with witches and werewolves. And I've never heard of a story of someone seeing a witch with a werewolf online,
Me neither.
but
No, I don't.
I've heard the lore about them being connected constantly. That's something I'm always reading about. And like so the skinwalker, I've heard you kind of bring that up a few times about their nature. And so I've ended up learning just as much about them as the Thunderbird because they almost go hand in hand. And I'm not talking about they're like, and this stuff gets so complicated. I always have to like backtrack a little bit and say like, just because there is, or in my interpretation, just because I think there's spiritual or these entities, that doesn't take away from the physical and what could be out there. Just because I was saying the Thunderbird could be this one being, and so getting into the lore of that is a can of worms, and there's a lot of interesting stuff that points to it just not being only a cryptid, but that doesn't mean that there's not unidentified birds. Could be
Oh, yeah.
pterodactyls, dragons, those things can still be out there. The nature of like werewolves or science experiment dogman or some sort of lineage of hominids entirely possible. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
I think that there's a unity and a duality between the spiritual and the physical. And just like we have a spirit, so does other things out there. If there are other humanoids,
Right.
they too share those same qualities. And like the reason I bring that up is because when digging into it, the skinwalker phenomenon, the one variation that I learned about, which actually fits into the lore that I've heard around here, is that it's basically a symbiotic connection between a demonic being and a human. And the native elder actually used that term. He called them the demonic beings, and he called he said they serve a master. He says the evil one is what he calls it. And I would actually share the link if you want to see, just for your own, if you want to check it out. Because when I heard this guy explain it, I thought, holy smokes, of course, because it ended up fitting in with not only the lore from this area, but when you get into the Bible, the mention of sorcerers comes up quite often in the symbiotic connection. And then this gets into the gods with a small g,
Hmm.
and that's when the Thunderbird starts coming up, is when you get into America. that he basically takes the position of king of the gods.
Hmm.
Oh
And
wow.
what not everybody knows, and the thing is like around here, people won't say that. They'll say, we don't think he's a god. I've had this exact conversation, is that they said, we don't think he's a god. He just connects us to the land and our ancestors. And I kind of thought about it for a second, like, oh, so creation and spirit, and that's not a god. Like, okay, it's like I understand
Right.
completely. There's a wool that's been pulled, and it was pulled over my eyes as well, because, and I don't want to, I don't want to finger wag and tell people that, that's bad. I That's not my authority to say what's good or bad. But I will say that when I first saw that Thunderbird, I thought of it as pretty good luck. Um, but now I sort of wonder exactly what the nature of it is. And you mentioned earlier about having the Thunderbird clan. Um, I have the image of our tribal crest, and it's actually a Thunderbird. And in our area, how they pass down knowledge is through the artwork. And one day when I was studying, I had realized, like, holy, I could actually read other cultures' artwork. When I would see it, I'd go, oh, hey, I see there's Thunderbird, and he's carrying a snake. And then there's a whole story why he carries that snake. And it's something that if you think about it for a moment, you'll start to remember, or even from now going forward, you're going to start to notice that there's an eagle carrying a snake everywhere. When you start to see things like coat of arms, um,
Yeah.
hieroglyphs, flags, even.
Yep.
The snake inside of the medical sign.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean,
You
I
know.
could go on a whole thing about that. So that sign actually comes from Greek mythology, kind of makes it more famous. I don't know where the origin is, but Hermes carried that thing, and they called it a caduceus, I believe. It's a twin-headed serpent that kind of wraps around a staff. That stuff gets into some deep
Oh yeah, because
mythology.
I mean, even if you go into the twin-headed snake, right? Uh, Look at back at Moses and the Pharaoh. There was two snakes. Moses the snake swallowed the Pharaoh snake, but there was two snakes.
Yep.
Yeah, there's something that's unusual about that. But I like the story of Moses. So eventually my studies took me to the Bible, and I don't think we have enough time to get all the way into it, but what I was saying about Thunderbirds and Skinwalkers and the connection between them gets into the spiritual nature of them and what exactly that means. And so the interpretation that I heard about skinwalking is, and I'm not saying this is the only way, because I'm sure there's more, but this is just one way I liked that kind of fit what I was thinking about in my experience. And I'm going to bring it back to my culture here, but the old guy says that the shaman essentially makes a deal with this evil one by, doing a ritual sacrifice, which will involve possibly an innocent being, but maybe a family member. They do the ritual, and what happens is the shaman, or I'll call him what's the word here? Not medicine man. What's the word for them? The skinwalker. I call them shamans or dark shaman, not
Right.
because of there's light shaman, but there's something called a medicine man,
Mhm.
and there's something called the shaman, which are separate, but people think they're one thing, but they have opposing ideologies. And even though they could coexist the same way, um, we could have Christians and
Catholics.
witchcraft and all these other things living under one society. In other cultures, the same thing would happen with other tribes, but typically the skinwalkers would actually live on the edge of civilization. They'd be like an outcast.
Mhm.
Sometimes they'd have their own little family off to the side. So it wasn't like every tribe had skinwalkers. There was some that would have these medicine men who are more like war chiefs. It's very different because if you get into their philosophy, it's more about plant medicines and things like that. It's not um, the witchcraft when we're getting into skinwalking now. Like the old man telling the story was he was an old medicine man. He wasn't a skinwalker, but he could tell you in our tribe or in our culture we have skinwalkers. These are like this is like a coin with two sides. And those we have that same coin with the same two sides everywhere.
Well, I
Every
thought you hit the nail on the head too whenever you was talking about the Thunderbird, being connected to the supernatural and being, connected to the werewolves. I don't know if you knew this, but Skinwalker Ranch, right? Uh, Whenever they would have the portals and stuff, that would open,
Yeah.
and they would have those weird looking wolves, that would come up that they, thought that they, were not normal wolves, possibly skinwalkers. They also reported thunderbirds and very large birds in the area whenever all this would happen. So
Yep.
I figured you would like that how that was connected.
I'm glad you brought that up because on Skinwalker Ranch, there was one story where what they called the dire wolf came up and grabbed one of their calves.
Yeah.
And
I remember that story.
oh, great! And the owner came up with the gun and shot it a few times, right?
Yeah.
And they said the bullets phased through until, and it was apparently a pretty high power rifle, but one of them seemed to land and a chunk of meat fell off this thing. And they said that the meat was rotten, like putrid, nasty, rotten, and they tracked it, and the footprints eventually disappeared into a field, as if it had just been beamed up by the Enterprise.
Yep. I remember that story.
But here's why that's interesting. Now, what I think of skinwalking is actually very different. It blends the physical and the spiritual in a way that gets things, it almost makes things more confusing. But when you start finding it everywhere, like including the Bible, and it paints more of a picture. But the skinwalker, apparently what he would do is the shaman would either drink a potion, and that would be the most common way, or he would fast until basically reaching what is called a NDE. It's like a near-death experience, uh, essentially. And the way the medicine man described it, he says the skinwalker flatlines himself. So if you've seen the skinwalker do his ritual, they're saying that he would have, and you took his heart, there's nothing there. He would be clinically, basically, as close to the other side as you can get.
Man, that is so interesting because the Cherokee legend of Spearfinger, she is mentioned to carry her heart in her left hand, and that's supposed to be the only way to unalive her. And if you take her heart and then it unalives her, that's really interesting.
And also about the potion, because it reminds me of the ointment, remember?
Right. Yeah, what was that, Ian? That was we just done
Yeah.
an encounter over that. Michael Verdon.
Yep.
He was using a potion and an ointment, and then you got Peter Stubbe. He was
Yep.
using a pelt belt, allegedly to transform to a werewolf. And now I'm even looking at another case that I'm going to try to do with Amanda and Sky, where another gentleman is also using an ointment, and these are back in the 1500s, John, and they're using these ointments that they are getting from, most of the time, a black entity, deity, and they have to make a pact with them, and they offer them money and everything, pretty much for your soul and being able to let you transform.
Yep.
Exactly. That's the same lore we got over here. They call it let me think here for a second. They call it a spirit food. That if you take this spirit food, you basically become a servant to a specific entity. And I think that entity in our culture is the evil one the Navajo medicine man was talking about,
Yeah.
Have
based on
you
the way.
have you heard of this name? And I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong. Have you ever heard of the Tuskegee?
No, it doesn't sound familiar, but maybe.
In Cherokee lure, it's there's a thing, and now I have heard this spoke about a lot by the elders and my grandpa, my granny, a lot of the Cherokees around here. They call it a Tuskegee, and the Tuskegee is a pretty much a demon or a witch or a shapeshifter, and most of the time she will appear as an owl.
Right. Which,
And I have a story, if you want a short story, I can tell you about something that happened to me that I cannot explain to this day. I don't know how it happened. I was living with my father-in-law for just a short time. I think our water lines had froze up in our other home, and me and him would sit up late at night and talk, and we would watch the hunting channel or something. And one night while we were sitting in there, we heard this like hoot owl, but it was really close and it sounded kind of off, it didn't sound right. And we went outside and he took his rifle. And when we had a 22 long rifle, when we went outside, there was a big tree in his circle driveway. And his yard, he kept his yard mowed all the time. He had a really pretty yard. I mean, there was no weeds at all. And we went out there, and in this big pecan tree at the very top, there was a white hoot owl. And this thing was the biggest owl I'd ever seen. And it was, I mean, snow white, beautiful white. And he shot it because he had chickens. And whenever he shot it, it hit it and it fell behind the tree. I mean, just straight down, just dropped it. When it hit the ground, we heard it hit the ground. And we walked straight over to it. There was a yard light pretty close. The yard was lit. The yard was mowed. There's no weeds or anything. And when we walked to the back of that tree, there was nothing there. Not even a feather, dude. Couldn't find nothing.
Wow.
The next night though, out over his chicken house, that same white owl was out there. And then it wasn't long after that his dad passed away. So you know how Indian lure goes with that, right?
With
yeah,
owls.
Oh yeah, an owl is in our culture, an owl is a sign of death.
Mike, you just saw an owl.
Oh yeah. Well, it has to come to your home.
Oh, okay.
If they come to your house and they hoot, I think it's if they hoot 3 times. And also, I don't know, John, if y'all are if a bird flies inside your house, that's also a sign that there will be a death in the family.
Oh, wow.
I don't believe in that because course, I'm a Christian. I don't believe in the superstition, but I still respect and study my, my culture, my
Yeah.
people's beliefs. And whenever you look at it, though, like what John was saying, it does correlate back to the Bible. And if you're a Christian and you believe in the Bible, then you do have to believe in some of their beliefs because it's all tied together, right, John? Wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it all. That's like the origin of the spirits for sure. And now the owl. Okay, one night I don't even know if it was a dream, but it just something I remembered was this white owl.
Oh
Now
wow.
something was scratching on my house, and it sounded like. And here's the things I don't even remember. All I know is I remember this. I don't know if it was a dream or not. It seems pretty real, but the wind was blowing and something scratching, and I think it's the tree. You know how a tree, when it's touching your house, the wind blows, it
Mm.
Yeah.
scratches the side of the house. So I open my window and stick my head out, and there's a large owl with. It's kind of got flamingo legs
Oh wow.
hanging on the side of my house. Now I'm
Wow.
thinking that one was a dream. But during this time now, I had 2 owl encounters. One of them, I thought it was a cat on the side of the road, and I was riding my mountain bike home, and as I got close to it, it I say it turned into an owl, but it it just opened its wings and flew above my head and
Uh-huh.
landed in a tree above me. It just scared the bejeebus out of me because I thought it was a cat up until it took off. But I had that same thing happen where I had my Thunderbird encounter where the night fell and I was on my way out, and in the darkness an owl flew at my face, and it went above and it landed in the tree above me, and it just stood there and watched me walk out of the forest.
I'm so
Now
glad you. Yeah, I'm so
and now
glad you said that.
one more thing, I
Oof.
always hear these owl sounds, and have you ever heard the term "who cooks for you"? Like, who cooks for you? Like the owls who say that. The
Yes,
owl,
yes, yes.
just about not my whole life, but for a good portion, I've heard owls, and they go hoot 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 hoot
Uh
hoot
huh.
hoot 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 hoot. At one point, I thought people have ornaments. I used to think, okay, that must be like, so my grandpa used to have a bird clock that would go off every hour. A new bird would chirp. I'm thinking
Oh
people
yes.
have some sort of ornament that is doing this same hoot everywhere I go. But eventually I realized it's just, once in a while, and you never see them, but I hear that sound once in a while.
Other things can mimic that sound too.
Yeah, I've heard a mimicking. Hey, John, have you ever heard like in the woods, like an owl, start doing their, their hoot, and then maybe like a little bit after their hoot, you can hear them kind of like do, I guess, a cackle or a laugh, and you're like, that's not an owl.
I never had that experience in the woods other than that one where it flew at me in the night. I've never really heard the owls in the woods. It was always in the suburbs where I would hear the
Well,
hoots.
whenever you mentioned that, you thought you seen a cat turn into an owl, just the other day, me and my mom are out driving the back roads because sometimes we'll go drive and just kind of look at the creeks and try to see the deer or whatever. And while we were driving, it was evening time, but it was still bright enough you could see. This is one of those weird things because in front of the car, mom was like, "Hey, look, 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 look," and we looked and we both said at the same time, "That's a bobcat, right?" So this bobcat runs in front of the car. Well, it goes down into the high weeds in the ditch, and then it comes out of the ditch and goes up into a cut pasture where they cut the hay at. Well, when it went down into that high grass, it come up over the ditch, but when it come up over the ditch, it was a coyote. And we both said that was a bobcat. That was so weird.
That's hecka weird.
it makes you wonder. Is that a shapeshifter? Is that
Yeah.
Getting back into the skinwalkers. So how they say it works is once they get that flatline state, that this is when the in quote transformation begins, and it's not the physical body that turns into a werewolf, but if you were watching it happen, you might see a quick shadow leave this person's body, like you see it dart out or something like that, but you
Oh
will not
wow.
see him turn into a wolf and go ow and rip his
Right.
shirt off like Hulk from Avengers.
Right.
I believe that has been. It's a
So would
Hollywood thing. What they do is they combine two worlds. When you get these type of movies, they take the physical and the spiritual and they mix it into one for a easy presentation.
so do you think a skinwalker would be kind of like whenever people talk about in a sense of astral projection?
I've thought about that and I can't confirm it, but I do know that there was one guy who was uh his name's Joe McGonigal, I think. People will recognize him in the chat for sure. He does astral projection with the government, and he's been ahead of some pretty in-depth studies. Some what would you call it, black project or whatever.
I
He
would,
had
yeah.
he told the story about how he had an encounter with a shaman, and I can't remember if he shot him or his partner shot him. Um, but the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because when that thing leaves the shaman's body, it isn't a ghost. It's not a physical. It's something like both.
Spiritual.
It's like what I would call a poltergeist, in which you only really
Oh,
get
okay.
when you like. The only way you get it is really. Excuse me, I shouldn't make an absolute statement like that. One way you get it is a Ouija board, and you're basically accessing power to some powerful demonic presence. And what happens is the difference between a poltergeist and a ghost or some other type of spirit, the poltergeist can scratch you, it can break a cup in your living room, it can hide things on you, it's different. And there's two different types. And this is why I was kind of like, I was trying to get to the connection with the Thunderbird and Skinwalkers. They're similar but different. In the Skinwalker needs a human host as a symbiotic connection. And what happens is the human now has free will over the Skinwalker. And like you said, astral projecting, that's
Uh-huh.
exactly what it is. It's almost like if I were to put on a VR headset and go into a video game like the Matrix, they're doing that with a poltergeist. And they're literally cruising around. It would
So
almost,
it's
in my
kind of
opinion,
like they're leading you, like they're taking you, kind of. Is that how it works?
I don't know for sure, but if I had to guess, based on the spiritual rules, whatever we'll call it the demonic being, whatever that is giving the body up for this shaman. When the shaman goes into the near death experience, now his spirit can leave the body, which allows it to go into this. Now, this is where the union happens, the symbiote connects. The reason why a spiritual being would need a human is because a human has free will to do things that a spirit cannot. A spirit has very specific rules and they cannot dance around them. They have, what would you call it? Rules of engagement, let's call it. However,
Right.
humans can do things For example, they can deny Christ. They can even badmouth him.
Right.
They can do they could do a lot of different things. Let's just say that in the world, free will cannot be stopped. And the thing about the spirit world is they have hierarchy, they appear to have rules, and I don't think that they can break them the same way that humans can. And that's so that's sort of where I'm at with why they would need the
Wow.
human.
Man, you brought like you yeah, because see, another tale I was told, I don't know if you've heard this. We were always told that if you have that owl that shows up, right, and you shoot and you kill that owl, they always say that if you watch for the person in your community that gets sick or dies, and that was the shaman, because the shaman was always the one that used the what the dark magic, the bad magic. They were considered evil, and when you would kill that owl, I guess the owl was kind of like their vessel, I guess. And when you killed them in that state, it would actually affect their physical body also.
Just like the Matrix, when Neo realizes that if he gets hurt or killed in the Matrix, he says Morpheus tells him the mind makes it real. But it's a similar concept where, except it's one world, but we have the two worlds, the spirit and the physical, are actually overlapping. They're not like a matrix where you got to plug into an alternate world. It's actually they're overlapping, but we're in the physical.
So kind of
But,
like
but
parallel universes, quantum physics.
exactly. Okay, that I'm glad you said that because they become quantum entangled, the spirit, and what happens is I believe that when the transformation is over, the shaman could even end up in the position of where that spirit was last found. And in that story with Joe McGonigal, so he shoots a skinwalker humanoid, which was in his hut, and they tracked it because it left footprints, just like at Skinwalker Ranch. The thing left some footprints behind, and they followed it to a village where a medicine man was sick. And now, to tie that in biblically, there's this story of, let me think his name. I can't remember the priest's name, but he got into spiritual warfare with a satanic cult, let's say, and he started talking about how they would perform rituals on people, and it would get to the point where the person would become opened up to the spirit world, and they would be able to see things that other people would not see. And this guy, um, he mentioned there's teachings about a silver cord, and when you leave your spirit in an NDE state, that there is this sort of bungee cord that attaches you to your body, that if you sever that, that you will not be able to get back in, and then your body it'll continue in that state. Where if the connection is not severed, the skinwalker will eventually make its way back to the body, connect in. And how that would look is just the person would appear to be waking up from a deep sleep. What
Isn't that
really
how, like Anton LaVey, and that how they say he died? Is that preacher had cut his silver
that
cord?
that's the story I'm talking about with his daughter, and they got into spiritual warfare. Now, if you remember the story, there was two beings that the preacher mentioned, and it was Thunderbird and the serpent spirit.
Oh wow!
Now the Thunderbird, and now my ears perked up when I heard that story and he said the Thunderbird, because at the time I'm still kind of in the middle of my investigation. I'm thinking like, oh, the cow, this is part of the symbolism, the snake, the bird, and usually it's the wolf. and this sort of unity with how they work. But where the Thunderbird comes in, let me use my grandma's culture, because they have a hierarchy that when I looked at it, I said, okay, wait a minute, they have something here. It's not something that when I was younger, I took what they had and I said, no, they had it wrong. Let me show you. You know what I'm saying? This is a cryptid. I'll be the one to decide what this art says.
Right.
After all this stuff, I went back and kind of take another look. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. No, these guys know what they're talking about. I'm the one who came in late to the game and ended up, what's the word here? I ended up in spiritual warfare far above my pay grade. But the
Oh, wow.
Thunderbird, they rank him number 1, and now there's a number 2 being who people confuse with Bigfoot. There's 2 separate wild men, and one of them, I think, represents more of a skinwalker, and while the other one represents a Bigfoot, which is probably, the ape hominid type. But where that gets confusing is, okay, consider that if the Bigfoot are a humanoid, they're a tribal people, they're connected to the nature possibly more than the natives. Would they also possess this same skinwalking ability? That's like another can of worms like to get into, but the connection with the werewolves and the skinwalker remains pretty constant across the board. Now, what happens in our culture is you make a deal with a specific entity who they actually kind of call him the Lord of the Underworld. Is kind of like what the name translates to. And he's not the Thunderbird, but they say he's number 2 on the power scale, I guess we'll call it. And that's rather important if we keep going, because even though it's kind of hidden, I was talking about those symbols, the snake, the eagle. They keep coming up in the symbology of these hierarchies, not only in America, but like Egypt. What's that other one? Aztec, Mayan, Greek. You get into it and look at their hieroglyphs, and they're very different, but similar. I believe they're painting actually the same picture, in that every single time the hellhounds or the Anubis, the werewolf types, specifically the ones connected to the shamans, they work for the number 2 being, who's this Lord of the Underworld. What do you think about that? Do you have any comments on that? I'll let that kind of sit for a minute.
I would say, whenever you said that, the being, the Bigfoot looking being being able to transform, shapeshift and all that, I would say so. I would agree with that because, I have the opinion that they come from the fallen angels, which, gives them that supernatural ability. I think that a lot of our technology and stuff was also shared by, the fallen angels. So yeah, man, I don't see why not. I mean, if it's out there, we've even been told that that Bigfoot can like live inside of a tree. They can absorb into it, if that makes sense. Like actually go into the tree, and that's why they would say that whenever you see him, he's moving, he's gone, and then you hear the wood knocks, but you don't see him. That's because he's inside of the tree.
That even goes back to some Celtic lore, where they
The tree
talk
people.
about entities and spirits kind of living in the trees. Sometimes they'll say it's the ancestors,
The tree people.
Yeah.
But what do you think about the Thunderbird being named number 1 and what this thing is in number 2? As far as like when you get into these mythology, let's call it mythology hierarchies.
Well, you definitely intrigued me because I knew whenever you started talking about that silver cord, I had known a little bit about the Anton LaVey story, and then whenever you mentioned it, he had mentioned that one of the creatures was the Thunderbird. I was like, wow, that's very interesting because, I mean, birds have always been a high symbolization to a lot of different groups, and it makes you wonder. I guess my question, or maybe a statement, would be is why would the top creature, why would it look like a Thunderbird? Why wouldn't it be like more of a bulkier looking warrior? But it's a bird. It's a large bird. Or is it a large bird, or is that just
what it wants you to see?
Yeah, is that what we're seeing, and is it many other things?
Well, I'm glad you said that because I have so many thoughts. I'm almost jumping back and forth. But one thing is that what if I told you in not only our lore, but other lore around the world? And again, the whole Thunderbird gets jumped, but the Thunderbird I'm talking about is the one that they rank as this number 1 entity who is, what do they call it? I want to say chief of the gods, but they don't usually use that term.
Mm-hmm.
But that's sort of, when you get into it, you look at, they have their own pantheons, and most of them are going to put the Thunderbird as, he's ranked as the number 1. But he's actually a shapeshifter, would you believe it, in the lore?
Yeah, I believe it.
And when he lands on the ground, he has a human form. So he's an eagle in the sky. When he hits the ground, he's got this chief-like form, or, like a king-type form. Now, we don't have many drawings or interpretations of that other than they just say he was, I can't remember if they were saying he was a giant or anything like that. Just that he was human when he landed on the ground.
That story, what you're telling me right now, it also goes back to the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. Gene Leroy, right? The guy that they ended up saying committed those murders. He was Cherokee. He was supposed to be a skinwalker. Learned it from a dark shaman. There was a lot of lore in that. Whenever I done one of the things that whenever you talked about the ground and the air, whenever he was interviewed by the FBI and the local police and all them, one of the things that he told them was, they said, "How did you know what was going on at the campsite when you weren't there?" And what he told them was, "I was there and I was watching. I watched from above and I watched from below." And whenever they arrested him, he was placed in a jail cell, and he told the guards that night, he said, "Tonight I will transform and I will escape from this jail cell." So that night was a full moon night. They said that he had got naked and was hanging upside down from his jail cell. He was doing something really nasty that was disturbing the other inmates. The other inmates were very afraid of him. And the next morning, he was gone. The police department still to this day do not have an explanation of how he done that. But they also, if you go back and you look into the reports, and these reports were not just like local police. These were FBI. You had the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations. You had your local police departments. You had your sheriff's department, forensic teams. I mean, this was a huge deal. And whenever you read some of their reports, they all were open to there was supernatural things going on. They would see Jean Leroy Hart walking in the trees, and whenever they would go after him, he would go behind a tree, they said, and then a black dog would run off or a bird would fly and he would be gone. And I got to the point to where they were doing the investigation on the murders. They would have to run little strings through the woods because they would see him and they couldn't catch him to see where he was breaking the strings to try to find him. They ended up finding him. Oh, by the way, he cursed one of their dogs too. One of the shaman walked past the dog and said, this dog will die. And it was one of the dogs they were using, and that dog actually did die. But whenever they ended up catching Jean Leroy Hart, they actually hired a medicine man to find him because they couldn't find him. The medicine man was able to find him. And when they found him, they said the medicine man tapped the bottom of his feet 3 times. And the investigator said, I asked him why he'd done that. And he said, I took his magic so that he can't, escape or do what he'd done before. He said he took his magic. He was then put in prison. And I think he died like 3 days later in prison of a massive heart attack. So that's a really wild one. Yeah.
There's lots of stories like that, and when you finally accept the possibility of the shamanism and what exactly that means, it can start to answer some questions that are relatively unknown because of the whole spiritual versus physical. When you have what happens when you got a spirit in the physical, or what happens if you slip into the spiritual? Would you know the difference? And that's that's where I had a few other encounters, and 2 of them are about slipping into the other side. And I've heard stories about other people who spent a long time and they didn't even know that they were knocked out of their shoes and in a coma. To them, they continued living in their own mind. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like, so this whole, and like when I get into that stuff, I'm not saying one's fake, one's real, and instead it's just there's 2 separate worlds that work differently.
I mean, look what Jesus told us: we wrestle not against flesh and blood.
The armor of God verse is actually pivotal in my story. What's kind of weird is I actually knew about it before I had read the verse. And when I read it, I go, oh, like that's what that is.
Right. Yeah.
Like, wait a minute. Like, because in that moment actually was more mind blowing than the other side. Now this eagle stuff, it comes up in the Bible as well. And so where I kind of like put all this stuff together with like shamanism and how that works is I don't know what to say. I don't specialize, but I research and I have experience in what people would call vision quests. Like, do you have any thoughts on that or any questions on? I'll explain a bit more, but when I say that, do you have anything that comes to mind?
Vision. No, I'm not familiar with that.
Because it's
Me neither.
a very old concept that's been around for a long time, and it was kind of made popular by a show called I can't believe I can't remember the name. It's an old cowboy show, Young Guns. How could I forget?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the native guy takes them out into the desert and gives them peyote.
Uh-huh.
Now that is a kind of like a simplistic cartoon version of what a vision quest is. That may be one version that someone can use, and it actually sounds closer to the potion that the skinwalker would need, is something that would essentially bring the person into the spirit realm, kind of like I don't know if you ever heard of an ayahuasca.
Yeah,
Yes.
psychedelics.
Yeah, and specifically DMT.
Yes, I've heard of that.
Basically, there's some overlap where actually some of those ayahuascas are similar to NDEs, but they are not the same. And like, I don't think people should attempt to do that stuff. It's actually dangerous, very dangerous to go into the Amazon looking for that stuff. There's actually one story of a guy from town here. It went kind of famous. He went down to learn shamanism in the jungle, and he never made it home.
Uh,
Oh wow.
He had a family and everything. So this definitely ain't me trying to what's it called? Talk good about or endorse it.
promote.
That's the word. Yes, promote it or endorse it.
Right.
And I instead research it because it ends up tying into what the medicine man and shaman actually is. And in my opinion, all this stuff is kind of connected, although separated. Like if you make a spider web
Mhm.
between all this, let's call it supernatural stuff, what I would put in the center of that whole picture um, is basically the spirit realm, or you can call it whatever you want, the death realm, let's call it, because generally you have to detach from your conscious and your physical self to get there through and where I learn about this stuff is from the old heroes in the vision quests. What would happen is they die on a hill at some point, and when they're dead is when the creator comes to them and gives them a vision. And we'll say, for example, they could give them a list of rules, and here's what you must do. Here's your rules of engagement. Do these things, you'll never be defeated. And so the hero wakes up, kind of looks around and realizes like, oh, they're back on Earth. Now I have to fulfill the prophecy, right? That I just
Yeah,
had from this other realm.
I have heard of that.
And it even dates back to the Bible with Samson and Moses in particular, who appears to have an NDE on the hill where he meets God. And why I would be connecting that to evil entities is because they use the same doorway. Uh, you could call it through unbelievers or through evil people. When they die, another one comes to, Jesus says to accuse them. He says, I've been brought into the world not to accuse, because someone else has been brought to accuse the unbelievers. At some point in John, he mentions that. So what I'm saying is it's almost like you got one door with two, there's a fork in the road. And this is pretty heavy duty stuff. So when I went through the door, it wasn't Jesus waiting for me. And I actually believe I had two visits. And this is the key. Like, this is why I believe why I understand some things, or why my worldview is kind of built the way it's built. Do you want to know, or do you want to take a guess what I seen?
That's what I was fixing to say. What did you see? Was it a Thunderbird?
No, not what you'd think of as a Thunderbird. Okay, so let's think here. So how much time do we got? Like, are you guys still interested in kind of getting to the bottom of?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're at an hour and 36 minutes.
Okay, because we've gone a little bit longer than I thought.
Or
But
do you want to? Or do you want to do another show?
well, I was going to say, if you wanted to do what you would call a members show, I think, where you can go a little more unfiltered, because
Okay.
what I'm going to
Yeah.
get into, I like I don't know. I think it's pretty freaky deaky.
Okay.
I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't
you got my attention.
Mine too.
like, and I mean, I mean, I went up nose to nose like a boxer at a stare down with one of them. So I had two, let's call them adventures,
Mhm.
where I woke up and I wasn't in Kansas anymore.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to take that to Patreon.
Yeah.
That way we don't get in trouble.
It's not anything vicious, but it is very, we can get descriptive. And
Right. Yeah.
like, and if you guys have found some of the stuff interesting, then I'm happy to come back for a number 2.
Yeah.
But
Let's do it.
is there
Let's
any
do it.
questions about some of the other stuff
I just
that
find it so like, man, how it all connects, right? I mean, you know,
My mind is blown.
well, you know
yeah.
what
I mean,
I find is that everybody knows this stuff. It's almost like things we've once wrestled with. Maybe maybe this is connected, but then you go on with your life. Like, I mean, how are you going to confirm such a thing?
right.
What happened with what I'm going to call vision quest, which has lasted like 10 years. What happened by the end of it is now I know how to visualize and describe what I seen. And that's
Oh wow.
something that is actually very, very hard to do. But to me, it almost seems like I don't want to call it a walk in the park, but it's almost like I could do it on the drop of a dime based on the journey I've already walked. It's not like I'm going to have to go out and achieve some, um, what's the word? Some extra item or something that'll help me, binoculars or something.
Right.
And I'm not trying to say I'm super powered or anything, but this is the part of this goes back to Jesus, and what I was talking about is he is the master of that realm. When we get into the spiritual realm, now whether or not there's two separate spirit realms, like I mentioned, that fork in the road,
Mhm.
there's certain things I just don't know, and there's certain
When
things that I
when
just oh, sorry, go ahead.
when you said that, the first thing I thought when you said the fork in the road is scripture popped into my mind. It one path is narrow and the other one is wide.
Right. and and that
One is to destruction, and one is to eternal happiness.
Salvation.
Yeah.
and the
Wow.
whole and something else that became clear in my vision is that Jesus is actually everywhere that the other people, well, I'm hesitating to find the right words. Entities, let's call them, gods with a small g. Anywhere you find them, you will actually find parallel the teachings of Jesus.
Yep.
But they combat, and where this stuff really gets explained is through Paul the apostle, who ends up in Rome, and he really goes into detail about Greek mythology. And there is one moment when he gets into Rome and he's looking at all the idols, right, the statues, and he comes to one that is an unknown god. And he was looking at the wisdom of this unknown god, and he was hinting that he believes that was Jesus, that since he's risen, he's everywhere teaching people the same way he taught Paul. So Paul is riding his horse in the desert, um, and he fell off his horse, and that's when Jesus appeared to him. So I think Paul had the revelation, like, oh, anybody can be connected.
Yep.
And while he was in prison is when he wrote all those books that are in the Bible now.
Right.
And
Yeah,
like
because
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say Jesus is omnipresent.
Yeah.
Now, would you like to hear something quick about vision quests on why, or should we save that one for later? Because there's this one really important story that when I read it, it seemed really important. And actually, one day I was bringing it up to this religious guy, and he goes, "Oh, that sounds like Paul." And at the time, I had heard Apostle Paul, but I didn't know exactly who it was. So I
Uh-huh.
was like, "Oh, okay, I better go research Paul."
Yeah,
But the
let's do.
origin,
Yeah, let's do that on Patreon because I'm going to have a million questions for you, man.
well, I'm glad you're intrigued because that's all I really wanted to do was at least open the doorway to be able to explain further because this stuff is so what is it? They're not of this world. Let's say that. And a vision quest, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a vision quest has got to be 1,000,000.
Yeah.
Wow,
But this Thunderbird appears to be right in the centerpiece.
that's
Right in the
interesting.
centerpiece, not opposing Jesus, but as an equal. But there's almost like every time somebody has a vision quest, let's just say that for some reason that same bird shows up. Would that make sense to you?
Yeah.
And then like when it comes back to skinwalkers, at the time I could have sworn that bird was just a cryptid or whatever, but looking back now, I wonder if it was like that wolf on the Skinwalker Ranch,
Right.
meaning at some point down the river it disappeared and was never seen again. To me, as the observer, the noise I heard, it was absolutely interacting. I seen the tree, I heard the wing, I saw it snap, but the identity of that extinct bird kind of connected a dot that these skinwalkers can use extinct animals.
So what if the Thunderbird is actually Satan because we know Satan can uh, shapeshift, and what if he is the deceiver? Uh, there's a tale in Cherokee of in the Bird Clan, and one of the ones is that the the crow are very deceptive. They will like lie to you pretty much, but they're very convincing. You know, but they're also very powerful. They're considered very powerful.
The crows,
Yeah,
yeah, and they're always associated with. In some cases, they're almost like goons to the king of the gods. You know what I mean? Like send the flying monkeys, and the
right.
ravens will go in.
Wow. Yeah, we could
Now,
go way down this rabbit hole.
um, let me think. I just had one idea here. I was gonna say. Now there's also more connections with this with the Thunderbird, and you said something interesting there about him being uh Satan.
Uh,
Sometimes I hesitate on certain words. Now that's interesting, and I got something a lot actually on the identity of what this thing is that would really if okay, so far if your mind is blown, like what comes next is like getting hit with a solar flare.
oh, wow.
And
Okay. Yeah, we'll set a Patreon up for sure.
and
And
we can also get into Bigfoot, like something that I was thinking about bringing up, but I was like, it might be a bit too far. Was have you ever heard of Bigfoot human hybrids?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, because I got a handful of like really interesting stuff that obviously is like kind of graphic. No stories about how it happens, but just like, you know what I mean? Just like stories about
Right.
alleged offspring, without the details, of how,
Yeah.
Right.
other than just like someone was taken. And it kind of gets into alien abduction, when you think about it, with the hybridization. And
I mean, even all the way back to the Watchers, right? The fallen angels. They took the women,
Yeah.
and it doesn't say that the women wanted to. It says they took the women.
Yeah.
exactly. And I got one more thing, and then I'll let you close out, because I know we're a little bit past the estimated time. But one thing I'll leave you with is, on the West Coast, and you might recognize it in other places. These two were also brought up in that Anton LaVey story. Is that the Thunderbird always sits on top of the wild woman's head on these totem poles, and that there's this entanglement with them, and some stories. And I got some super interesting stories why. But that's another one to contend with, because why on earth would you have the king of the gods appearing to have some form of relationship with a Sasquatch lady?
And this would be the king of the little G gods, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And
I,
there's
I see.
also
I
there's
see where you're going.
there's also a connection with the second one in this. And now, according to the lore, that they both, for their wives, took in a wild woman of the woods.
Which in Cherokee, some people would call her either Spearfinger, or they would call her the Deer Woman. Wow.
And the whole the owl thing fits right in too. So when it comes to skinwalker types, they can actually be more than just wolves. They can be cats, leopards. In the Amazon, they're more leopard. Typically, they'll be animals that are familiar to the area, but sometimes you'll get one that is like, for some reason, that they got the ability to turn into an extinct animal. And I don't know if that has to do with something being passed down, or why they would get access to extinct animals, but I believe that's on the table. That when you see something like a dire wolf or a prehistoric bird,
Right.
that it could also be a skinwalker who's got that form. And I think it varies. It depends on, I guess, the level of determination, let's say, on the shaman and their abilities, and what's on the other side of that.
Right. And
But
if you get the chance to look up that Tuskegee, I think you'll really enjoy that.
to Skilly, yeah, I'll definitely take a look.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. Is there any final questions you may have about some of the things I mentioned earlier?
I don't have any for now, but I will have in the Patreon, because I know if I do, I'll just keep going and going and going. Amanda, you have anything?
No. Same with me. I have some for the Patreon, but not anything that we can get into right now.
I know it seems like every time we mention something, I get two more ideas.
Yeah, that's what I was did. Well, let's just schedule a Patreon, John, and we'll set it up, and we will just do a number 2 and go completely through it, and you can tell us what was on the other side of that doorway, because I know we're all going to want to know that.
I want to know that.
Yeah, it's actually a difficult one to get into, but yeah, I think it needs to be done.
All right. Well, we'll set that up. And John, I'm going to let you run and enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate you coming on. It was an honor speaking with you, and it was very,
Thanks,
very
John.
interesting.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Nice to meet you, Amanda and
Nice
Mike.
to meet you.
I will send you an email to set up a time later. There's no
Okay.
rush. Like, if you need some time to sort of think about Because there's kind of like there's a few things I dumped on you that are pretty heavy duty. So if you need some time to reflect, then
Okay.
we could set it up in a couple weeks or whatever. You just let me know.
Oh, definitely. I will definitely be in touch with you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to try to find my way out of here. Nice talking to you guys, and I will catch you down the road.
All right. Thank you for being here, and God bless, man. See if we can get everything. There we go. What'd you think, Amanda? The Patreon is going to be crazy, isn't it?
Yes, mind blown. That's all I can say is my mind is blown.
Yep. I'm excited for the Patreon.
Me too.
Definitely. All right, guys. You heard it here. We're going to do the part 2 of this will be on the Patreon. What's on the other side of the door that John's seen? And what do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. What are your thoughts on this? What do you think? We'd love to see them and hear them and read them. And Amanda?
Good night, everyone.
Amanda says good night. All right, guys. Thank you for being here with us today. I appreciate your support. To all you in chat, we love you, appreciate you, and we're always proud to see you and visit with you and spend time with you. Until next time, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner, and we'll
Love
see you on the
y'all.
next one. Yep, for sure.
Bye.